And here we are. Hello, hello, and welcome to Thursday mornings at 11 o'clock, QT Conversations, Qualified Tutor Members podcast. It's our opportunity to explore our thinking in tutoring and to push it forward together because we believe that our collective efficacy, when we join together to share our thinking and push our practice forward together, we make change for every single one of our students. And by the way, for ourselves as well, because we're important too. So we have some new members in the room, which gives me so much joy. Faye, Nicola, Emily, you are the newbies around here, and the old bees around here will do their best to nurture you and help you to feel very, very supported in the journey that you're undertaking. So to give you a little bit of context for that for a second, this journey of either being an exiting teacher or qualifying, completing a degree or working in a profession and saying, tutoring might work for me for all the reasons. Tutoring might work for me because it's more flexible, because it's fulfilling without any of the exhaustion of managing a classroom and the compromise that is involved in that. And I get to be free and set my own terms and plan my own life. Now, the topic for today is, how do you know that you've been effective? How do you know that you've achieved your goals with a student? And in education, that is the bajillion-dollar question. How do you know that they learned what they needed to? Because, as John Hattie says, learning is not visible. So if learning is not visible, how do we know that we're doing what we need to for them before it's too late? Right? So what you can't say is, I know because they get A's. I know because they passed functional skills. You can't say that because that's a summative assessment. And by that time, you've sort of lost your chance, right? And you can say in the long term, I know that the last student got where they needed to go. And so the next student probably will as well. But every student is their own world. And every time you work with every student, you need to know that you're bringing them forward. And so the question today is really, really nuanced. It's, how do you see learning? How do you make the learning that you're trying to create visible? And before we talk about any of those things, we have to say, what is it that you're trying to achieve? So this conversation goes in two parts. Firstly, it is, what does effective look like for you? And then it is, how do you know that you've been effective? And if we've got time, we'll talk about, what do you do when you've not been effective? And what are the ways in which you should be adapting or pivoting your approach? Can I have a thumbs up that seems like a good conversation for this morning? Stick. No, Nicola doesn't agree. Oh, she does. Okay, good. Good. Josie, if you're able to put your screen on, it'll be a much better conversation. Thank you, Emily. And let's go. So before I press record and go live and all of those things, Dee was just telling us about a new student. Over the weekend, one of Dee's existing students moved on for very sensible reasons. Dee had no intention of taking on a new student, but when the student approached her, she couldn't resist. By that afternoon, the father and the child were sitting in a living room having a discovery call. That's a key point here. And by the end of that discovery call, everybody was excited because what they knew was Dee was likely to be able to help that student to get to where he needed to go. So, Dee, can you talk to us about what effective looks like for you, and how in that discovery call you were able to evaluate alignment between what the student wants and what you can deliver? That's probably where we need to start.
Okay. Um, I I have to um establish rapport really, really quickly. I have to establish that there is rapport really, really quickly. And this again is where my coaching training is coming in now. I'm much more open to the non-visual clues as well as what the student is saying. And I am much better at asking the questions during that discovery call that's really going to unpick where the student's at and if I'm the best person to help them. And I'm always clear with the student and the parent that it's not just about, do they like me? but do I feel that I can be the best person, the most effective tutor for them? So it all boils down to relationship.
It does, but that relationship is also built on purpose because you and I have a relationship, but we don't really have an agenda. Whereas when you take on a student and they pay for your time, there's also purpose there. Um, so speak to that a little bit because you will have got a sense of what the child needs to achieve, and that's what you're going to be measuring your impact against.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
And the student was very clear about why they were there. Dad did a lot of the talking to start with, and then the student, with my help with some questioning, backed up everything Dad had said and added to it. So I could see what his motivation was. And I was, through my questioning, getting a sense of where the barriers are at the moment, where the struggles are, and starting to think about whether I'm equipped through the experiences I have to really speak to and deal with those barriers and remove them and make the learning, therefore, as effective as possible.
Fantastic. Okay. So, Jenna, can you speak next to this idea of what it is that you're trying to achieve with each of your students, how you evaluate that, I guess, in the discovery call, but also, because it will continue to change and deepen and develop. And let's hear about that as a starting point.
So I think it's really, is my sound okay today, by the way? Yay. I'm winning at life today for a change. Largely thanks to Dee, who made it so that I have heating.
How did Dee manage that? Goodness me, the skills know no end.
I know, and we're like 4 hours away from each other or something crazy.
Did she tell you to turn it off and turn it on again?
No. She made it so that I now have, so we're not on gas or anything. We're out in the sticks too far to be on the gas network. So we've got oil. And Dee made it so that we have oil because I could not cope with phone calls. And we have a
lovely. Arrange the delivery of whatever the fuel was that you needed.
Yeah.
It's a friend.
It's amazing.
That's amazing.
Apparently, I'm now a VA as well.
Yeah, doing it all, Dee. Absolutely. It's really...
Jenna, just for context, I just want to share with you that in the chat, people are talking about how they feel about the discovery calls and whether they love them or hate them, and that becomes really interesting as well. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I never used to do discovery calls. I found them really, really awkward and really almost staccato, if that makes any sense. Like they were always so painful and so weird, but
spiky conversations.
Yeah. And it always felt like, okay, so what do we actually, like, what is best practice? What should I actually be asking in these, or talking, how should we be setting these up to actually make them helpful for everyone? Because it shouldn't be a one-way street. It shouldn't be just me laying out the law or them laying out their law or whatever, which some parents are inclined to do, you know. They're like, I want it like this, that, and the other. And some parents are like, turn up and they're expecting it to be a price negotiation. Sometimes, you know, they have...
Next week, can we talk about pricing?
Oh, yes, please.
I've never dared do that one before. Okay, tell us more.
So I did a lot of research, like, I mean, hours and hours of reading. I talked to so many people in so many different industries. And I was also going through a bunch of what was essentially the same sort of thing for myself in procurement areas. I was still the CEO of a charity at the time. And I hadn't realized how often I was doing what essentially amounted to discovery calls with suppliers, with commissioners, with funders, with
so you
families.
were on both sides of that relationship.
Yeah, and it was really, really interesting. And then talking to, I had some really cool opportunities to talk to a lot of different types of entrepreneurs and business figures, because I was very involved in, I was, before I'd retired from politics as well, so talking to some really, really fascinating people. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to start my journey of just asking people what they do. And it was kind of where I started to find my voice and my identity as well a little bit more, and my own personal sense of confidence and stuff. Because like I can hear it now, my voice now, literally just how the timbre and everything of how I speak now is completely different. I have like a baseline of almost confidence there
I knew that
I
was the
never
word.
used to have.
Okay,
And
so
I
let's
mean,
pull that back, because really, you know, that's what's lovely about what you're saying is that you're measuring your own progress. You have this sense of, and what you've pointed out how, you know, sort of sensory those measures are. Yeah, a staccato conversation versus a conversation that's got a base of confidence becomes really interesting. And if that's your language for measuring progress, then that makes a lot of sense, and it does resonate, and it's a curly way of communicating,
I
but
like
I would say it is effective. And I want to know how we're measuring that progress. I'm going to push you guys today. I want to know how we're going to push that progress with our students. Jen, I'm coming back to you.
Okay.
With Dana, you go next, please.
Yeah, I think the discovery call, going back to that point, is really important. And I actually have it as part of my terms now, where I say that in order to help you evaluate what you're maybe about to use in terms of my services, there's a couple of different options. So I say the discovery call, and the wording I use is to establish aims and expectations and to answer any questions, which I think is helpful, because then you're working out what they actually want and whether you can promise to deliver that. And I'm very reticent. In fact, another thing in my terms is about, I'm not accepting the idea that I can guarantee that you'll get a certain grade, because I can't. You know, I see still people doing that where they say like, you will pass your exams if you work with me. And it's like, even that, I mean, it sounds like quite a basic thing, like just to pass, but you don't know, do you? You have
Sorry,
no
hold
idea.
on. You need to go further. Why do we not do that?
Because I don't want to be held responsible when it's not actually up to me to do
Go
the
on.
exam.
What's that second bit?
I'm not doing the exam. I can help
Okay.
them. It's like the whole adage, like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Do you know what I mean? Like you could be the best tutor in the world, but you can't guarantee a certain outcome.
Why?
And even if you look and even if you've got a track record of students doing well under your supervision, it's not necessarily the case that that's all down to you. Do you know what I mean?
Why?
Because they have to do the exam at the end of the day. Like it's up to them.
It's not
So,
just the exam. It's not just those 2 hours.
no, exactly. Yeah.
Tell me more.
It's the idea that it's collaborative, I think.
Nice.
So going back to the discovery call point, a lot of people have made this point already, but it's about working together on the goals, not just having you say, this is what I can offer you. It's the other way around as well. Like, are you gonna, and that's why I have a section in my terms like, this is your responsibilities as a client. Can you make sure you show up on time? Can you make sure that you actually do the homework? Can you make sure that you're actually in contact with me about what you want to do, rather than just having the sessions booked in and then leaving it? That's too passive an approach, I think.
So for me, those are already measurable goals. You've said in the discovery call, you've asked them to agree that they can show up on time. And then they show up on time. And that's
Hopefully.
already a win, right?
Yeah.
Or it's not a win. And then you have to remind them that that was the agreement. And you have to work towards that as a learning goal. And it sounds silly, but every one of these processes is part of what you have to be measuring. And you're setting that culture right at the beginning. And that piece around collaboration becomes really, really interesting. What I was trying to explore there with the why can you not guarantee a result is all the wild cards in working with another human being, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You know, like when you engage with a teenager and you say to them, why are you not doing whatever it is that is expected to do? Well, there's a million reasons that you don't know.
Yeah, that have nothing to do with you as the tutor as well. Yeah.
They came in with whatever they came in with.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you can only start measuring progress if you're able to understand all those different factors and plan for those as well.
Yeah, which is why it pisses me off a bit when I see, you know, agencies, for example, say, you will get this grade if you follow me, if you come and work with us. It's like, it irritates me, because I think you're giving false hope in many cases for a specific outcome to the student and the parents as well.
I think that was a completely correct use of pissing off. And
I was like, am I allowed to say that?
I know. But I think that the reason why that is because it really does feel personal and it really does feel wrong.
It does feel wrong, yeah. And I think it goes down to like the ethics of what we're providing.
Nice.
And I think that's something we have to consider a lot, you know, in many different areas within the job. But that's one thing that really irks me, I would say.
Beautiful, especially because we know how vulnerable a person is when they turn to a tutor.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And it's young people as well.
Young
That's the thing that I think oftentimes people overlook. Like if you're talking predominantly to the parents, for example, trying to set up sessions, you can often like sometimes it gets a bit confused. Like the lines get a bit blurred between what the parent wants and what the student wants. But I feel quite bad for young people nowadays. I think they've got a lot to contend with. It's very stressful. I think anything that we can do to, you know, take a bit of the load off and the pressure can be good. But it's getting that balance, isn't it, between wanting to deliver a good service, but not like putting the student under undue pressure, knowing that it's still a stressful time inherently. So it's a tricky one.
Fantastic. Nicola, am I okay to come to you next? And I think the question is, and I hope we're getting closer to, you know, that's how we do it here. We sort of have the big and then it comes down to a thing point. What does good look like?
Hi, yeah, I'll be honest, I'm keen to spend a lot of my time listening today and sort of taking in. I've written down a question for myself. So what does effective look like for me in an online one-to-one context? Because my main experience of that particular type of teaching was during lockdown when I had either one-to-one because none of the students turned up or so yeah, I'm still exploring in terms of like the classroom. What does successful look like? I mean, how long is a piece of string? It could be that their writing is improving. It could be that their engagement and conversations is improving. So I don't know, engagement, questioning, I suppose, is the main thing that comes to my mind. But
Really nice.
yeah, apart from that, I'm happy to sort of just listen, I think, is my agenda today.
I'll respect that.
Thank you.
And I also feel that along with questioning, one of the things that we've spoken about, Rosanna, you and I have spoken about this quite a bit, is risk taking. Risk taking is a really lovely measure of progress, isn't it? I'm going to have a go. I feel safe to have a go. I know enough to have a go. That's really one of the ways that we love to see our young people develop. Faye, do you feel ready to dive in and start answering the question of what does effective look like? And you do need to give everybody a little bit of context because nobody else has had anything about you yet. Because go for it.
Okay. Yes, I'm a head of department currently in philosophy and ethics. So I'm just getting my head around this discovery call business because I'm just setting everything up at the same time as teaching. But from what I've heard this morning, absolutely understand everything that people have said. And I guess from my perspective, Socratic questioning is the thing that I can see when a child is starting to really get something. So good for me is this. Sorry.
I know what you mean.
Oh, sorry.
I want you to unpack it for us. So how does Socratic questioning inform you about where your student is? What is Socratic questioning and how?
Socratic questioning is, so you've just done it to me.
Did I?
So I gave a certain amount of information and then you unpacked it for me by further questioning. And then I start to think further about your question and giving some more information about that. So I guess in a philosophy classroom, I can see when they are thinking a bit further about the questions that I'm asking and then asking me questions back. So I guess that for me at the moment is how
I'm absolutely going to take that. I really find that very helpful. You need to know that Rosanna's been the only philosophy tutor around here for quite a while, and she's really, really chuffed that you're here. A very quick wave.
Sorry, I missed that.
Although that's not fair, Jenna, because you are a philosophy tutor in all the things you do. I know that very well. Margaret Mary, we're on to you.
Hey, there's lots of things that are firing off in my brain, but I'm going to try and focus on the question. I kind of work with the dripping tap philosophy with my students, and I talk about it. Basically, if you put a bucket of water under a dripping tap, that bucket of water is going to fill up. It might take a while. So I I kind of keep on at them. Every drip in your bucket is moving you forwards, is helping you to get whatever their goal is. In terms of how I focus my lessons with them, again, I start with where they are. I'm always finding out what it's like for the student. So if we've done a little bit of learning, sometimes I ask them, do you want me to go through some of this? Do you want to go straight to the question? So if it's a topic they've brought that they're doing in school, sometimes they'll say, can you go through it? So I'll go through my presentation with them. Sometimes they go straight for the question. When we're in a question, then I say to them, ultimately, we want you to be as independent as possible. Do you want to lead in with this question, or do you want to go for it? So depending on how confident they're feeling, sometimes if it's something new and difficult, they say, can you give me a lead in? So then I work through and I talk through my thinking. So I model what I'm doing as I go through the question, having the conversation with them. If it's a calculation, I say, right, okay, if we've set it up, you do the calculation on your calculator. So they're not being passive. And then we try another question similarly. And again, do you want to go for it? Do you want me to help to give you a lead in? Until they're at the point, and we do another question and another question, until they're at the point where they go, I think I've got this. And then they go for it. And then we might look at the mark scheme and help improve their answer. But it's always it's the learning conversation. I love Hattie as well, and I know that learning conversation is really, really important. So I'm finding out, where are you? How confident do you feel to try this? And working with them to get to the point where it's either nearly there or they've completely got it. Sometimes if it's nearly there, it's like, okay, we need to let this breathe for a while. We'll come back to this later. And sometimes it's not. It depends how long we spent on it. But it's always about the conversation. It's about finding out where you are and what's the next step. So it's just, how do we put another drip in your bucket? So I'm not really, but I'm partially, well, I'm not really thinking about the ultimate grade. I am in what we're doing, but it's micro. It's what we're doing now in the present, and all we're doing is putting another drip in your bucket. And because that's manageable. Put another drip in your bucket. That's what's important.
Stunning. I think I had a bit of a profound moment when you were describing your process. And there were two things. And one is, maybe this is a really stupid question. What does effective look like? And how do you know that they've learned? Because maybe it's simply ask them and ask them and ask them, because that's what you've described there. Do you want to have a go? Do you want more support? And keeping watching. But the other thing was the sophistication in that process that you described, because you know what that end goal is, but you know what the micro goals are along the way. And because you have that big and little picture, when you use that phrase, sometimes you need to let it breathe. There's so much experience sitting behind that phrase. And of course, what we want to do is take a newbie, take a novice tutor, and get them to that point. And sometimes you've got to let it breathe is so tutorish. It's not a thing a teacher gets to say often, right? Because there's no space to breathe for anyone. And that child wants to breathe, but that child wants to go on. So you don't have that luxury. But to be that in tune with the subject, the child, and the process of learning is a really, really sophisticated level. Is that fair, Margaret Mary? Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, because if you ask me how do I know, I can't explain to you how I know. I know I did a course. I used to do these live revision courses with Justin Craig, and there was one particular incident. They always took the students out to do a questionnaire with them, and there was one student where I've been working over the 3 days on NMR. So he was really struggling with NMR. And the first day, I worked with them for about half an hour, just him, while the other students were doing something. And then I said to them, this will come, you just need to wait. We're going to let it, we'll come back to it in a couple of days, like on the last day. And I could see him panicking. And I said, just let it sit for a bit. And then when I had him on the third day, I was sitting down with him again. And we were going through some questions again, and they came in to take the students away to do the questionnaire while I was working with this kid. And I said to them, no, you can have him in 5 minutes, because it was like, I know we're pressing on the ceiling here, and any minute now this is going to click. And it hadn't clicked yet, but it was about to, and I wouldn't let them disrupt it. And they looked at me like, none of our tutors have ever refused to let the students go for a questionnaire. And I said, I'll send him in 5 minutes. He's not coming at the moment. And I see the student look at me, and they look at me, and I just thought, but literally a minute and a half after they'd gone, this student suddenly went, oh, it's this. And I was like, there it is, there it is. And he came out of his paper with the NMR, so this was months later. He sent me a message and he said, thank you so much, you were so helpful. But I can't, when you're saying it's subtle, I cannot describe how I know that this hasn't clicked, but it's about to. I can't tell someone else how to recognize that. I just know it when I feel it, if that makes sense.
Well, yes, it does. And I'm sort of going to allow it, but I want to remind you how much that's to do with the relationship and the alignment. Because what you've done is you've gone so close to where the young person is that you can anticipate where they're going to go next. And that's the only way you could know that they're about to get it.
Yeah, I think sometimes but it's the cognitive, there's the gap between when the penny drops. There's a gap between I don't get it and suddenly a shift. It's like an earthquake. So I suppose it's like sensing when the plates are moving and the pressure is building, and you know that the only next possible thing is for an earthquake. Yeah, maybe you're right. It can't go anywhere. So you have this sense of this is nearly there. That this is about to snap.
Unbelievable. Yeah, and I have to tell you, my Wi-Fi dropped out for half a second just when you were saying that they were just about to, and just there it froze. It was very dramatic. I want to, Emily, let me know whether or not I can call on you, because you've not replied in the chat, and Emma's resting today, so she's just listening. What I want to hear is whether we're getting somewhere in terms of measuring impact, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you for why. So you know that I'm building out this postgraduate certificate in professional tutoring. And what's lovely is I get to go into this awesome university of really open-minded, open-hearted people and explain to them tutoring, because they know all about education. They run an education institute, but they don't know how we work. And that's what I get to reflect back to them. And so the first part of this is going to be two big modules. And the first one is focusing on pedagogy, so all the teaching and learning skills that we know impact our practice, and the business skills that align with that, and the culture and the vision and the mission sitting behind all of that, making sure that you at least know what you don't know. Yeah. So Nicola, I'm looking at you and I'm thinking about that journey, and just as much as you can, leaving somebody knowing at least what the lay of the land looks like. And then the second part wants to be a big, in-depth project with a few cycles where we look at a student and we deliver a sequence of learning with them, and we measure that sequence of learning to evaluate whether or not we've been effective, and if not, how we need to improve. All of that sounds correct, am I right? Those of us who have been on equivalents in PGCE, that sounds like the right approach, but that piece around measuring impact remains elusive. And in tutoring, firstly, it can't be, because it's our business. We won't get the next student if we're not doing it right. We need to be able to communicate that we're doing it right. We need to know how to improve if we're not yet doing it right. and the student's happy isn't good enough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? Because they'll be happy if you give them a chocolate biscuit.
Mm-hmm.
That's not enough. So
for me, the effectiveness comes from what the parents are saying to me, because they're living with this child 24/7. So if they're seeing changes not just in their what's happening at school with their grades and things, but if they're seeing changes in their attitude to the subject that was causing them anxiety or whatever, or they're seeing changes generally in how they are dealing with life, how they are communicating with other people, all that kind of stuff, which is all part of what I do when I'm a tutor, because I'm now a coach as well. I'm bringing all of that in,
and that progress will be spiky.
Yep.
This lovely person who I'm collaborating on the PG Cert with, he was talking about a student of his who was an elective mute. Is it called elective or selective? I always get that wrong. And one day he just handed something to her and she said, "Thank you." And he was like, but she didn't do it again and again and again. It wasn't like magically from then on she spoke, but he knew that she was clearly feeling safe and lots of other things in order to have answered one time. But progress is spiky. So Dee, if you are waiting for parents to say, my child is more pleasant to live with, less frustrated, more pleasant to live with, sometimes that'll be forthcoming and sometimes it won't. And you have to plan your work. You have to plan your input.
Which is why I ask for input from the parents at regular intervals.
Nice.
What differences are you seeing?
Nice.
What's working, what isn't?
And do they understand the question or what they could be looking for? Or is that part of how you're educating them?
Absolutely, yes. They've not had to think that way. Then they've not been asked those questions before. So it is an education process for them, definitely.
Faye, can I call on you again?
Go on.
So again, we're looking to see how we would measure impact in a way that can be, if not formalized, then at least clearly articulated. And we've understood the impact is lots of things. It's studying and it's also attitude to studying, knowledge, beliefs, and skills.
So again, for me in the classroom, when I see those epiphany moments when you have asked a question and they've answered through that kind of thought process, my next stage is to try and get that onto paper so I can see that transition onto paper and those skills and trying to work on those skills.
Nice. So there's something about onto paper that is concrete. I'm thinking about the building works that I'm doing at the moment and how gratifying it is to see walls going down and walls coming up, and you want to see something concrete.
Yeah, and it's about constructing ideas. We can construct ideas for them, but they should be able to deconstruct and then construct back up again. So if they can do that on paper, then that's ultimately what they're being tested on. But I think that where we can kind of manage that learning is through that conversation and making sure that we can see where those gaps are. And you can see it kind of verbally, and then you can see it kind of on the paper. But on the paper is where those gaps are, I guess, more obvious.
So that's really helpful, that distinction between I'm assessing my student constantly in conversation, and then I have this more sort of in-depth, slightly higher stakes assessment. And it might be formative, it might be summative, depending on where it is in your sequence. I'm using all the lingo today because I know I've got lots of teachers in the room. So what we're looking to do there is we're looking to make sure that the assessment itself is as effective as as informative as possible, because a GCSE exam, it's not very informative because it's too late by then, right? So how do you get them to write something down and it gives you what you need to do without clamming them up or stressing them out?
I think that the problem that I'm finding again in the classroom, because my experience is simply in the classroom, is that we say to students, you're not getting this right, do something, and it's very kind of vague. So what I tend to do is is work with them on a paragraph that then I can actually show them that there's a gap, and they can see the working process, and we work together on kind of creating something that they can actually visualize and see. And then I guess it's going back to, I don't know who said it, sorry, the drip bucket effect, kind of.
But Mary.
It's kind of replicating that again, so they can see again when they're writing that process of success, I guess, and talking them through it and collaborating through, I guess, this for me.
Yeah, there's so many layers there. And again, to use the jargon, we're talking about metacognition here, because you're teaching them to see what they know and how they think and all of that process. And of course, it's particularly interesting and relevant when it comes to philosophy, because that's all about the thinking. But it's just as relevant in the science. Now, Margaret Mary, you just put in the chat here, that is the question. And I don't know what you're referring to. So I need to know.
How do you get them to write it down? I would say that the students I'm effective with are the ones that subscribe to my method, basically, and they write stuff down. I've had 2 this year that have kind of gone on their own way, and I would say the thing that both of those students had in common was the resistance to give it back to me in writing. And they say, well, I don't really like using this Cami that you're using. And my sense with them is they would be quite happy for me to sit and talk to them, but I want them to give it back to me. And trying to say to them, it's really important I see what you're doing. So we try these questions. And I don't even mind if they don't use my app. With one girl, she ended up getting a whiteboard, and she'd write it on her whiteboard, and I would literally snip it and put it into the online workbook. But those 2 students that, I mean, eventually they decided that I wasn't the tutor for them. And I would say my frustration, and I would notice I'm not being effective because I'm frustrated, or the tutoring's not effective. I'm not going to say it's me. It's because I know how to help you do this, but if you're resisting me, you're not going to make as much progress. I know that if they do this.
There's something so profound in what you just did, in saying it's not that I'm not effective, it's that the tutoring's not effective, and that's got something to do with both of us because of the partnership.
Yeah, and it's that the bit that was triggering me earlier on was about the discovery calls, because I had to do a lot of work on that, because I found I'd come out of teaching with I didn't even know it, but it was a trauma response to talking to parents because of various histories in school with abusive parents. But part of my discovery call is I describe my process and where it's coming from, so when they then don't do it, so I'm not laying down any laws. I say, this is how I work. Does this sound like what you're looking for? And they always go, oh, yes, that sounds great. But then when the student resists I'm going to work with you collaboratively on an online document. And if I'm having to have the conversation with them again and again, I really need to see what you're writing so I can help you. This is the bit that will make you progress a little bit further. And they still resist it. Those are usually the ones that end up going away. And I feel frustrated with them. I know I feel frustrated with them.
Well, but you just identified that sense of being triggered and trauma. And I'd love to know what's going on. It's a different conversation. What's going on with them that's causing them to, what's going on with them that's causing them to feel resistant to this collaborative document?
On the one hand, I don't really know, because when I ask them, they go, "Oh, I'm not resistant to doing it. It was just that my pen didn't work, or I didn't have my whatever last week." But it's week after week.
But they don't realize that those are excuses, not reasons.
Don't know.
They don't realize.
I'm quite. I was going to say I'm quite gentle, but I'm Scottish, so maybe it doesn't come across gently. But there is that. I do remind them about this conversation. This me helping you to move on, to improve, requires for me to see what you're doing. Because it's easy. I mean, again, it's the asking. I think somebody said, can you really just ask them? Because sometimes they don't know when they say, oh yes, I understand that, and it's like, no, you don't. You think you do, but you don't.
Which again is the Socratic.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
that's
So
when you get to really tease it out.
yeah,
Find
but
edges.
also part of this, I've got a couple of students and they really want to get A stars at A level, and I'm thinking, okay, tough ask.
How far?
And
Nice.
they do understand stuff. They can give it back to me verbally, and then it's going, now we're going to write it down. And they look at me like I'm bonkers, but it's like, I want to see you write it down. So it goes through your brain. So, and then I look at what they've written down and then show them the mark scheme. And this wouldn't get you the mark here because, so it's not that they don't understand it. It's just that the written expression of it isn't going to get those marks that they want. And when they cooperate with that process, they're like, okay, I had to explain to one last night what pedantic means. I keep saying you need to make like Sheldon and be pedantic. And they were like, what? So some of them they've gone off to watch Big Bang Theory. And I say, no, it's annoying.
My kind of homework. That's my kind of homework.
Yeah, but that's the kind of conversation I'm having. It is that pedantic, and I realise it must be really annoying for them because they think I understand this, and then they write it down, and I say, well, you wouldn't get the marks for it though.
It's firstly, you're doing them a massive service by teaching them that attention to detail, and secondly, if you think about life goals, again, it's a massive service. Teaching them to slow down and articulate is so much more interesting than the grade that they get.
I know that, but they don't always. Some of them don't appreciate it. It's not fair to say they don't. A lot of them actually do appreciate it. They do appreciate it.
Tell you what I appreciate
the
right
ones
now.
who stay appreciate. The ones who go don't appreciate it.
Two things. Firstly, I'm appreciating all the sunshine and sky that's appearing in this on my screen right now. Thank you. And secondly, I hope, Margaret Mary, that these conversations help you feel like you're not shouting into the void, because you spend all this time talking to truculent teenagers. At least you know that we agree with you.
Yeah, I've made that seem really bad. I've emphasised the places it's not successful because they're sore. Of course they're sore. Because you start going, is it me? Is it me? But then this Scottish Lanarkshire girl goes, it's not you, don't be ridiculous. So I have that conversation in my head. But it is sore when a student walks away and you've been frustrated with them. And I've been interested when other people are saying they're getting that stuff in the discovery call, and I'm not, and I don't know. I don't know if I should work more on that. I'm going to have to
Really
think on that.
So Julie Shandley Edwards, in addition to all the clever people in this room right now, Julie Shandley Edwards talks about her onboarding meetings, discovery calls, as a mutual interview. And it helps her having to not sack too many students later on. And there's a real sense of, I'm only going to take you on if I feel like you're the right person. Now, we've only got 10 minutes left, and with 3 things we need to do. I want to hear from Jenna. Then Emily's come on screen because she wants to ask the group a question. And then if we've got a chance, I do want a key takeaway in terms of what measuring impact looks like for you. Jenna, you're up.
I think this is a massive one that I could talk about for ages. So I am going to try and really put it back, particularly because I missed a whole bunch because of the door going and then power cut. So apologies. But I think that for me, I mean, it's been a massive journey for me in particular this past year. And I remember joining QT and that being my question like every single session on a Thursday. And it kind of feeling like, especially with the way that I work, that is a bit more holistic, that is a bit less traditional, even when I'm preparing a young person for an exam, even when they are a student who is at that A star or level 9 kind of grades, that it's still holistic and it's still rounded, and I find it really hard to just teach one subject as a result. It's always going to be slightly cross-curricular. Dog, come back. Sorry, we've got an unsecured garden and it just goes into farmland for like several thousand acres.
But if you use that voice, then mine's going to come as well. So don't use the voice.
So I think for me, looking at progress and measuring that has been a journey that I think is always going to evolve. And I think for me, it's dog. Sorry, it's the journey that young person is going on, but also showing them, not just me, because I can see more than they can about their progress. And if they feel it, they're gonna make more and
Beautiful.
see it.
You can see
but
more
I think
of their progress than they can. We
yeah.
could use the dog as the metaphor. You can see where she's going more than she can. And when you show her that there's cows in the next field that aren't going to be friendly.
Yeah. I think something specific that I kind of was thinking about, was it Margaret Mary who was just speaking before?
Yes.
So I think even when you're doing that pre-exam learning and you're not feeling like you're getting the answers you want when you're asking them to demonstrate their understanding, there are two kind of avenues that I tend to take. One is going through the metacognition, telling them why you're asking them the way that you are, telling them that you are looking for something specific in the context of thinking about exams and the way that you demonstrate knowledge there, or the kinds of knowledge that automatically is asking for, but also looking at, like, I find that when a young person understands the metacognition of retrieval and the neuroscience behind some of that,
Nice.
even for
The
really young
purpose.
kids,
Very nice.
that makes a difference in that they have a better understanding of what you're asking and how you're asking it and why you're asking it the way that you are. That means they have more almost acuity and just that introspection and everything to be able to actively go through the steps to retrieve it in the way that they're needing to. But also that the way, like, a lot of people think that asking for understanding is like, hey, can you tell me this answer, or answer this question, or what do you know about X, or do you know this? And there are lots of different ways of asking that question. We do sometimes talk about that. We've talked about that here before, but I think we could talk about that for ages. But I think the bigger part that we talk about a lot less is the answers, the format of those answers. Even if you're preparing for an exam, it doesn't have to be, here's a Google Doc, or here's an exam paper, or a question on paper, write out your answer in this format. It could be to write a silly poem about it, pretend that you're doing, if you've heard the mini robot in a human skin skeleton song. I don't know how many of you are on neurodivergent TikTok, but that sort of thing, right? Pretend that you're explaining this to a 5-year-old or to an alien or someone who's never had this, or really do it, go and research songs about this. Like, we had so much fun for one of my level 9 students last year who was doing her GCSEs to go and find raps and songs about Macbeth, and it was absolutely hilarious. And I have got a whole playlist, specific, like several playlists of those.
What's
but
lovely,
also
what's lovely about you're describing there is separating out the knowledge and the skills, and finding ways for them to communicate their knowledge.
Exactly. Can I share one more thing really quickly?
Yes, and then it's Emily, and then we've got a minute and a half.
Dee was telling me about the clouds behind me and how cool they are. And I was like, oh my God, they are so cool. I really, really want to steal Dee for an afternoon where it's like this and go for a walk, because I want to go for a walk, and I want to, and I love doing this with students, right? The best learning happens on a dog walk. And I want just Dee to ramble at me and tell me about the clouds. And that there is showing that knowledge and asking that knowledge in a different way. And I think you can do that with kids in so many ways.
Well, I could tell you that I feel like I've measured the progress of this session from your enthusiasm and the fact that it all comes and folds back in on itself with all the thinking again and again. And yes, we all want Dee in our pockets when we see interesting clouds. Emily, see what happens when you leave it to the end? You have to speak fast. She's going to be first next time.
There we go. Yeah, sorry, I was just taking notes on various things that people were saying, including what Jenna was just saying about finding more creative ways to demonstrate the knowledge, because when I'm getting bored, there are got to be other ways of doing it. I think I'm very conscious that as still a relatively new tutor, I've only had one student that this applies to, but I'm currently working with them where I feel the tutoring is not effective. They are not engaging. And at the moment, I guess the stage I am in my tutoring career, I'm assuming that's entirely on me, that as a tutor, I should be able to find a way to get every single student on board, and doing well. It reached a point where I did speak to the parent just to sort of share what I was seeing and finding. And they were like, oh, none of this surprises me at all. This is exactly what they're like, which it was so helpful because I was so nervous about
Oh
telling
no,
them
he
that
never
I was
answers
really
back at
struggling
home.
with their kid. And then they're going, yeah, well,
That's weird.
it's also. So it's given me a bit of a boost because I think, okay, this isn't all about me. This is actually their personality, their feelings about the subject, and so on. But I'll need to do a bit of thinking about how I react to that in future.
Yes. And let's see if we can come full circle. We spoke about discovery calls. That idea came in very quickly because really what it is your initial assessment. It's your assessment of the attitudes and the beliefs around the subject. And the more you can find and the more you can stay in tune with what's going on with that young person, with their attitudes and beliefs, the more you can pinpoint how much it's your own input that's making the difference. Because if they've come in with all this baggage, it's not on you. It is for you to help them to drop that baggage. And then those are your learning goals. But you have to know where your young person is starting from.
Yeah, I mean, I think this young person doesn't want tutoring at all.
Right. So there are many of us who wouldn't tutor somebody who doesn't want to be tutored.
Yeah.
And that is a position of luxury. Yeah. Like, you're given a student in an alternative provision context, whether they want you or not, you have to find a way and you sit outside their bedroom door until they're willing to engage with you. That's a different role. But in an academic tutoring context, in every tutoring context, you get to set your parameters.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And that discovery call creates the beginning of a shared culture. Now, there's so much that we've covered here, and we've only got a minute left. So I'm going to do something really mean. I'm only going to hear from Nicola and Faye because I want to hear what the new ears sound like, because that's my opportunity to check for progress. So Nicola, are you okay to go first?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, really interesting. Thanks everyone. The discovery call aspect it's not something I've thought a huge amount about, but yeah, really, really thinking now, okay, how can I use that really judiciously? Coaching conversations actually seems like a really useful way in. So thank you, Dee, I think it was, for that feedback. And Jenna, I love your last point as a reminder of learning looks like many different things, and it's just about, okay, what are your goals, what are those micro goals, and then what are the best pieces of evidence that I can draw from to identify whether or not those goals are being met, even if it's in a slightly more flexible, creative way.
Beautiful. What is the gender neutral equivalent to the Little Miss series? Because in my head, I've just given everybody in this room a Little Miss title, and Jenna's would be learning can look like different things. And I think that's just so cool that each one of us brings that kind of a thing to the table. If you can answer that Little Miss question, Roger Hargreaves, I'd be delighted to hear. Faye, what are your takeaways?
I guess it's that tapping into creativity. I can't remember, sorry, the lady with the lovely clouds and the dog. I guess for me, it's that I get students to change the lyrics of a favourite song, and it taps into their, it resonates with them. So I guess my takeaway today is that a lot of what I do in the classroom, I think I can put into tutoring. I just need to see that kind of the platform and how it's going to work.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for participating. I am completely distracted by the Little Miss titles now. That's what you're going to see from me for the rest of the day.
Yeah, nice to tell us.
It's been yum It's been genuinely delicious to do this thinking with you, and I look forward to more of it in the future. Thank you, Nicola. Thank you, Dee. Thank you, Faye. Thank you, Margaret Mary. Thank you, Jenna. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Rosanna. Thank you, Emma. You guys are a joy. Have a great weekend. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.